This is a post recording of the closing remarks given at the NARST 94th Annual International Conference. Science Education, a Public Good for the Good of the Public, Research to Empower, Evoke, and Revolutionize. I will provide a few remarks and close with final thank yous. NARST 2020-2021 snapshots and a peak beyond, with a peak referring to the next level. The 2020-2021 term began with the cancellation of the 2020 conference due to a virus that would claim 2.91 million lives and still counting. A virus that would bring the world to a screeching halt and forever change what we knew as normal. As we pivoted, adjusted, and readjusted, while dealing with the loss of loved ones in our communities and in our families, the unfortunate but usual atrocities and catastrophes did not pause. Mass shootings in Nova Scotia, inexplicable brutality that shook the conscience of the world for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Explosions in Beirut. Extreme flooding in Honduras after Hurricane Iota. And a new Ebola outbreak declared in Guinea, to name just a few. Despite the trauma in the midst of unprecedented challenges, dedicated NARST members volunteered and devoted their time and energy, experience, and expertise to maintain the functions of a very complex organization and better position NARST for uncertain times ahead. There are several layers of operation in NARST. The level at which initiatives are conducted pertains to the organization-wide committees. These are called NARST standing committees. Tasks in white are those regularly implemented, sort of the usual course of business. And tasks in red feature tasks initiated during this term, the 2020-21 term. So the awards, administered recognitions, Distinguished Contribution Award, Early Career Outstanding Doctoral Research Award, which requires months of planning and follow through. But in addition, they initiated and implemented a new recognition program, the NARST Fellows. And we have our first class of inaugural NARST Fellows this year. There were 3 award recipients. The Elections Committee managed all aspects of securing elected leadership for NARST. Equity and Ethics administered BASU scholarships, planning and implemented pre-conference workshops and conference sessions, and they reviewed several organizational policies and procedures using an equity and ethics lens. And 2 of those policies or procedures that I would like to note for this year is the NARST Auxiliary Event Policy, which is a policy that considers NARST's liability when extracurricular activities are held at the conference. And you can read more about this policy in the policies and procedures posted on the NARST website. We also standardized the annual event survey so that when changes are made within the conference or within NARST, we are able to collect data across time and be able to compare that data to begin to ascertain the effectiveness of a particular change. External policy and relations developed policies and procedures around NARST position statements on certain topics and issues. And we hope that you had a chance to participate in the administrative session around a NARST position statement on equity. They also planned conference sessions and established affiliation agreements with other organizations. And as noted in the NARST membership meeting, the revenue streams for NARST are limited. So during the 2020-21 term, we began to contemplate different revenue sources for NARST. And one of these is collaborating with and partnering with other academic entities in order to generate revenue. An External Policy and Relations Committee was very involved at establishing policies and procedures while we were in the midst of entertaining a project by an organization. The Graduate Student Committee was busy with its usual task of administering travel awards and planning and implementing conference sessions. But also during this year, they utilized social media to build community within graduate students of NARST. And they also held writing groups and webinars throughout the term to professionally develop graduate students. The membership committee, like all the other standing committees, engaged in their usual activity of planning and implementing conference workshops and sessions. They also surveyed the membership to get feedback on the NARST official tagline and logo. And they took on additional responsibility to develop strategy to attract practitioners involved in research. NARST, like other professional organizations, is experiencing a decline in its membership, which is one of the major sources of revenues for NARST. So in order to be proactive, this committee began to think about what are ways in which NARST can maintain its mission and focus on research, but broaden its scope to make it welcoming and beneficial for practitioners to become members. The membership committee also developed a standardized annual event evaluation survey, which was proposed to the board and approved. This would allow us to collect data on changes from one year to the next and be able to assess the effectiveness of a particular change. Publications Advisory Committee, in addition to its customary duties of advising on JARS matters, administering practitioners and research travel awards, and planning and implementing conference workshops and sessions, this committee also contributed to policy and procedure development for revenue generating collaborations. And they also held a webinar for individuals to participate in how to publish. The research committee maintained its usual activities of renewing research interest groups, planning and implementing conference workshops and sessions. And in addition of administering the selection of the ABLE Institute, they had to pivot and consider the ABLE Institute as a virtual institute, which will be its first virtual implementation this summer in 2021. The International Committee, like the other standing committees, administer travel awards, administer the selection of what is called the Linking Science Educators Program. They selected recipients to receive funding to participate in Summer Institute and planned and implemented conference sessions. In addition, they spent an inordinate amount of time reviewing procedures and refining them so they would be more equitable with respect to the purpose of each of the award activities and initiatives as it pertains to international members. Now, the website committee, which is relatively new in comparison to the other NARST standing committees, it created virtual spaces and repositories within the NARST website for NARST standing committees and board committees to complete their work and store documents. And this is a notable achievement that has been in the making for at least a decade. The committee also developed a strategy for populating the NARST website with content. And the last NARST standing committee, which is definitely not the least, is the committee, the program committee that is primarily responsible for implementing the NARST annual conference. This committee manages the conference proposal submission and acceptance process. They also review or approve the annual conference program. In addition to that work, which is essential for an annual conference to even be possible, the program committee actually did additional duties during this very challenging time with COVID. They developed the first nomination process to elicit speakers from the NARST membership for the president's selection for the keynote plenary. And this was a suggestion made approximately 5 or 6 years ago during a NARST membership meeting. We were able to implement that this year. The committee also provided feedback in the selection of the vendor for the first NARST virtual conference. And the committee also developed the first formal process to elicit networking and social sessions from the NARST membership for those to be implemented at the NARST annual conference. So members have been very dedicated and working under some extremely pressing conditions to make sure that the normal operations of NARST continued, and also looking ahead and excelling to position NARST better for the future. A few years ago, the board changed from a hybrid of a working and management board to a governance board. And with this shift, the board now focuses on what I call big ticket items. These items are necessary. It is necessary to address these big ticket items in order for any nonprofit organization to survive, to be vital to its mission or its field, and to excel and succeed in that field. So the first big ticket item is the financial health of the organization. For the past few years, the board has been approving a deficit budget, which in most sectors is not a wise practice. These deficit budgets were approved with the expectation that revenues of the following year would balance the budget. This year, we balanced the budget. We engaged some cost-cutting measures that did not impact the services provided by NARST or the quality of those services, but allowed us to balance the budget. We also, with the 2021 conference, virtual conference, we are very likely to have a surplus to generate revenue so that NARST will be in the so-called black entering the next term, the 2021-2022 term. It is important to balance these budgets because, as we know now, the unthinkable can happen. And when it does, the organization needs to be positioned to not only weather the unthinkable, but be able to prepare for the future challenges that result from the unthinkable happening. So in order to position the organization so it can continue to weather and excel in conditions or under conditions that are not conducive to being vital or the vitality of the organization, it is important to devise an investment policy statement. And at the very minimum, this investment policy statement establishes the parameters for accessing funds from the NARST rainy day fund when it is needed. And it also sets up triggers when that withdrawal from a rainy day fund would occur. And with the unsettling trends that correspond with past projections in higher ed, we had a 10-year projection done for NARST this term. And unfortunately, it shows that under certain assumptions that may be a little bit more optimistic than what conditions actually dictate, but that NARST would begin to pull from its rainy day fund within the next 5 years. So an investment policy statement will help navigate NARST through this unfamiliar terrain. The other big ticket item that we engaged during the 2020-2021 term is fundraising, which relates to this mandate to consider other revenue streams for NARST, is thinking about sustained and comprehensive fundraising. There was a working group of past NARST presidents who generously volunteered their time and their expertise, and they developed a framework for advancement. So with this framework, we are better positioned to begin implementing a comprehensive fundraising or capital campaign for NARST. And the last big item that we began to address, and which is extremely important, is re-envisioning the management support structure for NARST. The current structure, the overall cost of our management is not sustainable. And it is not as efficient and as effective as is needed for NARST to seamlessly conduct its day-to-day operations. And that is going to be a very important and very difficult challenge for the board to figure out how we can, in a financially wise way, support the day-to-day operations of an organization where the work is actually completed by volunteers who work full-time. And the last big ticket item that we have been very cognizant of throughout the 2020-2021 term is tracking relevant external patterns and planning accordingly. Because NARST is positioned within higher education as a sector to which we belong, it is extremely important to know the pulse, to know what is happening in higher ed in terms of the vitality of our departments, of our schools, of our institutions, what kind of funding is being available for professional development, which often supports faculty and graduate students to attend the annual conference, as well as supporting individuals who pay membership dues on an annual basis. So we need to be cognizant of these shifts and be able to anticipate how these shifts in higher education are going to impact one of our major revenue streams, which are the number of members in NARST. And as I mentioned earlier, there has been a trend where professional memberships are declining, not just for NARST, but across the general board for professional organizations. And the other major revenue stream for NARST is the royalties from JARST. And the publication landscape has been changing over the past few years, and that change has been accelerated due to the challenges presented by COVID. And so there are some very difficult decisions that lie ahead with respect to JARST and those royalties. These are very significant challenges that require the attention of the board, not on an intermittent basis, but on a regular basis. And these challenges are difficult. And when challenges are difficult, there is a tendency to retreat to old ways. And familiar ways, and that would be, in my opinion, disastrous for NARST. NARST is in unfamiliar territory, and there are many challenges that lie ahead. And so the board must not relapse into the former arrangement of the board, which is a hybrid of management and working, and directing its sole attention to issuing directives to committees on how to run initiatives and programs. The board needs to focus its attention on the big ticket items that are pertinent to the sustainability of NARST for in perpetuity. So I would encourage the leadership in NARST to continue to move forward and to move forward to the peak beyond. The board must make decisions with an eye towards the future, not just addressing the demanding issues at the time, which is very easy to do. And the NARST membership has a responsibility by volunteering to run for office if you are equipped with the competencies, the skills, and experiences that are needed to lead in this particular time. And the NARST membership is also responsible in terms of voting, electing individuals who can effectively manage and lead. And that requires more than being prominent in our research area or in our domain. In closing, I would like to take a moment to thank individuals who made this conference successful, as well as this 2020-2021 term a successful one. First, the program committee. I've indicated the tasks that they performed throughout this year. Members of all the NARST standing committees, as well as the board of directors. The board of directors, many of them shifted from thinking like a faculty member in charge of initiative and programs, which is what was required of past boards, to thinking more like deans and provosts, and actually dealing with some of these major issues that are crucial to the existence of NARST in the future. I also like to thank Zach Swart from Open Water, who came in near the end of the process of the setting up the virtual conference. But through his efforts, I think we've had a very successful conference. And then Kayla Chandler of Virtual Incorporated has managed the day-to-day logistics of the virtual conference. And lastly, I'd like to thank the management team for the many hours they have invested, sometimes working over the weekend in order to address issues that arose in various aspects of NARST. I'd like to say that I was honored to serve as your president for this year. And I encourage others to step up and contribute to NARST. It's a challenging but an exciting time. Many of us have sort of grown up professionally in NARST, and I think stepping up and leading and managing in these leadership roles is a good way to give back to the organization and to ensure that the organization that helped us to develop will be there for many other generations ahead. And I wish the incoming president, Renee Swartz, the very best of luck. And I'm sure she will do a fantastic job as president